Hey everybody, it's Jim Johnson. Welcome back to my channel. I am the project manager and line editor of the Star Trek Adventures role-playing game and the Captain's Log solo role-playing game, both published by Modiphius Entertainment. And I am here to talk a little bit more about Captain's Log and, to a lesser extent, Star Trek Adventures. But one of the questions I've been seeing a lot online lately is all about Captain's Log, specifically related to what if you are playing the game or you want to play the game, but you don't want to play a Starfleet character, or you don't want to play a Starfleet game, you don't want to play a Federation game, you want to play some different alien species in the setting, you want to play maybe a merchant campaign, maybe you want to do something different. Like, how do I do that? How do you do that? How can you make that happen in Captain's Log? Given that the book is 320 odd pages long, and we focused on the core game experience that we would probably expect from a Star Trek game, that the vast majority of players are probably playing a Starfleet officer on a Starfleet ship, going boldly, just like you see on the vast majority of the shows, right? Like almost every show is focused on Starfleet to some degree or another, with a couple of exceptions. You certainly got non-Starfleet characters and you've got non-Starfleet ships, but for the most part, Star Trek is about Starfleet and Starfleet officers going boldly, adventuring, learning more about the world and the humanoid condition. Again, there are exceptions, but Captain's Log really opens the door to you playing literally anything you want. Like any character that you've seen on screen in Star Trek from the very beginning to now, and even into the future, I'm willing to bet that any character that you see on screen in Star Trek, you could tell a Captain's Log story about. They don't have to be a captain. They don't have to be a member of the Federation. They could be literally anything you can think of. So that sounds like a tall order, but because of that huge remit, right, there's only so much stuff we could pack into a 320 odd page book. So to do something different off the expectations of the game requires you to do just a tiny bit of legwork, and so that's what this video is for, is to give you a little bit of a helping hand to, like, well, how do you create a character that's not Starfleet, or how do I create an alien species that isn't in the book? I mean, we did pack in, I think, close to 60 alien species into the book. If the one that you want to play isn't in there, like maybe you want to play an established species, a character from an established species in there, or maybe you want to create your own species. Super easy to do it if you want to. So I'll talk about creating, custom species and using species that aren't in the book if you want to do something different. And then we'll also talk a little bit about starships. All right, so that's kind of the overall outline, as it were, for this episode, for this video. But let's just jump into it. So what I'm doing is right now on the screen I've got the Delta Quadrant book. This came out a number of years ago, all about the Delta Quadrant, all about the Borg, all about Voyager's explorations through the Delta Quadrant, some of the species and creatures and ships that you might encounter along the way. So just as an example here, I'm going to dig into some of the NPCs. Actually, you know what? I'm going to go back a tick. Oh gosh, what page was it on? Was it page 50 maybe? It's been a while since I've been through this book, and forgive the page flipping, but here we go. So chapter 3 of the Delta Quadrant source book tells you all about the species of the quadrant. We provided a whole bunch of new life path options in here for you, including the Ankari, the G, Liberated Borg, Lokiram, Mari, Monians, Okampa, Pandari, Sakarians, etc., Talaxians. So, as an example, I'm confident not all these species made it into Captain's Log, because we were really trying to focus on the more well-known species, and also the species that were most likely to be in the Alpha and Beta quadrants, since that's where the vast majority of Star Trek is set, in either the Alpha or Beta quadrants. Of course, DS9 explored the Gamma quadrant to some extent, and of course Voyager was almost entirely set in the Delta quadrant. So there's still that opportunity, though, for you to play Delta quadrant characters in your Star Trek Captain's Log game. You might choose to do a whole series of stories in the Delta Quadrant, or you might choose to have a Delta Quadrant species somehow make it into the Alpha and Beta Quadrant. Like, the possibilities are really endless. But let's say, for an example, let me just see something here that I'm kind of sort of familiar with, just for the sake of this discussion here. Let's go with the the Monians, right? So let's say you read the description, or maybe you've done some research online, and you think the Monians are really cool and interesting. Of course, this book provides you some character information. You certainly aren't required to buy the book. Like, we don't necessarily want you to go buy books. I mean, there's tons of resource material online that you can go to look at. But the gist that I'm trying to head toward is using a character species that's not in Captain's Log. The only pieces that you really need are, and I don't have a way to make this a pointer, but the trait, the species trait. This is Monian, blah blah blah. Talks about what Monians are and what they do. You need a species trait, so that might take you a couple minutes to write up a paragraph, or cut and paste from some online resource that tells you all about a particular species. And then you need to figure out the attributes. Every species in Star Trek Adventures and Captain's Log provide 3 points of attribute bonuses to your character, whether it's +1 to 3 separate attributes, or in some cases you could do +1 to one attribute and +2 to another attribute. I don't think there are any species in either game that has a +3 to 1 attribute. So if you want to be something really super, like a species that's really super slanted toward one particular attribute, sure, you could do it. I mean, maybe you've got a species that's really super fit and they have a +3 fitness and no bonuses to anything else. It could happen. There are certainly a share of hardy species out there. We don't have the Brickar yet in Star Trek Adventures or Captain's Log, as I recall. So maybe you decide that the Brickar are like nigh, well, not to say nigh invulnerable, because they might have a resistance bonus, but maybe they're just super fit, and maybe you just arbitrarily give them a +3 bonus to fitness, with the realization, or the understanding that attributes cap out at 12 anyway. So do you want to do that? Up to you. But anyway, to use a new species, or to use a different species in Captain's Log, all you need is to either use the attribute bonuses as they're provided in our products, or just make them up, because it's literally deciding which 3 attributes that species favors the most, and then coming up with a trait. That's literally all you really need for a character species. And in fact, if you look through the book, right, like I've got my print copy here. If you were to look at chapter, what was it, chapter 4, chapter 3? Yeah, chapter 3. You look through that list of species, starting on page 93 and so on. Like, literally the only mechanical elements to the characters are those 3 attribute bonuses, and then everything else is derived from all the other parts of the life path or creation and play. There are some species talents that might inform your focuses if you decide to pick some focuses here, but you don't have to, but they could generate some ideas for you here, right? Like the Monians have access to nomadic heritage, which gives them affinity for navigation and positioning, so that might influence the focuses you select. And then they have Submariner, which means they're really good at navigating underwater. So that might be a focus, navigating underwater, or Submariner, or whatever. So don't be afraid to use any of our products. Every product we have usually has non-player characters, new species, and new ships, whether they're non-player character ships or they're space frames. So don't hesitate to mine that content for ideas. And little secret for you, if you haven't explored this game yet in much detail, get yourself a link to the Star Trek Adventures Character Builder app that's available online for free. Use your favorite search engine, search for BC Holmes Star Trek Adventures. It's going to come up. BC Holmes is the current manager of the free app. They are adding a lot of new content to it on a regular basis. They do it for the love of the game. They are not paid for or officially endorsed by Modiphius, but we sure love the work that they're doing, and we really appreciate the builder is out there for everybody to use. The builder has most of this content in there in terms of like the species and the ships and the statistics and stuff to help you build out the characters. It doesn't provide any real rule stuff, because like we expect you to buy the core book. BC maintains that app with only so much information in it, because they want to support the game and the books too. But if you're looking for a long list of species, the character builder has them. If you're looking for a whole bunch of ship options, the character builder has them. So I'd say certainly go check that out. It doesn't have everything naturally, but it's got a lot of stuff in it. So this is how you play a different species than what's in the book. You just do your research either through the internet or by poking through our products. There's a whole wealth of RPG products from Decipher, Last Unicorn Games, FASA, Armadillo, Design Bureau, etc., etc. So there's tons of species options out there. In fact, you could even take another franchise's species and port them right into Star Trek Adventures, because all you need is 3 attribute modifiers and a trait description, right? So if you wanted to bring in some alien species from Star Wars or Firefly or literally anything out there, you want to bring in the Mondoshiwan from the Fifth Element, shouldn't be too hard to do. So yeah, I mean, have fun with it, right? You get creative and do something different. So hopefully that covers species. That's pretty much. And actually, I should say that the same is true for original species. Like maybe you like to be inspired by all the different species that are out there in all the different science fiction franchises. That's great. Maybe you're an artist and you like to sketch weird, amazing alien creatures and alien species. That's great too. Come up, with a cool sketch, and then look at that sketch and think about how that character of that species would translate to Captain's Log, and come up with 3 attribute modifiers, and write up a short trait paragraph. And like, okay, what is about that species that is unique and important? What's their demeanor? What's their outlook on life? What are they good at? What are they not good at? What traits? What elements of that species immediately make you think of that species, right? Like if you think of a Vulcan, there are certain things about Vulcans that are consistent from Vulcan to Vulcan. That's what would go into your species trait. Hopefully enough said about that. Any questions, of course, drop them down in the comments. Let's jump over to starships now. So you've got your own totally unique, interesting species, and now you're like, okay, well, now I've got my interesting species. In this case, I wanted to play the Ammonian. I don't think we have a Ammonian ship in here in particular, but anyway, so let's say, for example, maybe my Ammonian character is a merchant, and maybe they've stolen a Talaxian freighter. So do I have a Talaxian freighter in here somewhere? The species 8472. Let's look around here. Crown Time Ship, Crown Warship, Hirogen, Kazon Raider. Here we go, Talaxian freighter. So maybe I've decided to play Talaxian, and actually, I honestly don't remember if we got. I'm pretty sure we got Talaxians in here by virtue of Neelix. And Neelix being a main character, I'm sure we tried to make sure that all the main characters were represented in here. Yeah, of course, Talaxian right there. Page 101, Talaxians are in there. So anyway, but we're working on the Ammonians, right? So let's say I'm playing a Ammonian who has either purchased or otherwise acquired a Talaxian freighter. But guess what? There's no Talaxian freighter in the book. We didn't have room for it. We didn't have a means to put in every possible ship. So you have a couple options. You could go to the internet or to your library of Star Trek nonfiction resource material, come up with some ideas about what's a Talaxian freighter, why does it matter, why is it important, and then what you need for ships are system and department statistics, right? So if you look at each of the stat blocks in the in Captain's Log, you'll see that every ship has a stat block that has their systems and their departments, and that's very similar to your characters' attributes and disciplines. And you won't be probably using the ship stats to roll quite as often as you will your character stats, but this is a place where you can pick your you decide what your ship looks like. So for this example, we got the Talaxian freighter here. Actually, let me turn my video off here just so you can see the stat block a little bit better. I'll zoom up here. There we go. So like, okay, I'm a Ammonian freighter captain, and I've acquired this Talaxian freighter. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here. Since this is statted out as a non-player character ship, I would just copy all these numbers straight onto my character sheet, as is. Comms 5, engine 6, structure 5, computer 7, sensors 8, etc., 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 etc. Don't need anything else down here except for scale. So this is a scale 2 ship, so it's pretty small. You might just note the weapons that it has and the talents, certainly the talent, and use that as an inspiration, right? So then, and in fact, you might even want to look at this and say, well, these numbers are not quite where I want them to be. I might tweak them just a little bit. Maybe I want it to be slightly better structure, or maybe slightly less computers. There's nothing saying you can't take this stat block and adapt it to whatever you need it to be for the purposes of your game. A Talaxian Freighter Scale 2 with 12s and everything probably doesn't make much sense unless there's a really good story reason for it to have that. But this is one way that you can bring in a non-Federation ship into Captain's Log, is simply by digging through some of our other products and pulling those stat blocks in just whole cloth, just as they are. Or if you want to be a little creative, do a little tweaking to the numbers here. Move some system points around, move some department points around. It might be worth noting that the Utopia Planitia book came out last fall of 22, and that adjusted some of the way ships are generated. So that might be an opportunity for you to check the math and look back at some of these older products that don't adhere to Utopia Planitia, and see where you might want to tweak the numbers a little bit, maybe add a point or two here or there, or just use Rider Fiat. This is your game, make it your own. If you want to tweak the numbers, no one's going to stop you. We're not going to come over to your house and tell you you're playing it wrong, and we're not going to tell you that your Talaxian freighter has too many points in security or whatever, because we don't care. We just want to hear about what the amazing stories are that you're telling. So if you feel the need to bump up these stats or bump them down, whatever, go for it. Again, it's your game, it's your world. Do whatever you want with it. So that's one way to pull in a starship. The other way is to simply start with a blank slate and just pick numbers that seem to make sense to you from a feel perspective, right? Maybe you're building a scale 3 cargo hauler, and you just think about what era of play you're in, because like the numbers for ships gradually go up the further into the timeline you go, and you might decide that your ship is comparable and needs to stand up to certain. Maybe you're planning on fighting the Federation. Maybe you're planning on fighting Starfleet in your game. That's an opportunity for you to look at some of the ships that are in the book already and adjust your ship statistics accordingly, so that it can stand up in a fight, or maybe overpower a Starfleet vessel, or maybe be completely overwhelmed. Just depends on what kind of story you want to tell. So that's the second option, is to just create stat blocks out of whole cloth. There was the third option. There is a third option. I'm trying to remember what it was off the top of my head. The first one was to just pull stuff out of the books whole cloth. The second one is to make it up. What was the third one? Well, it'll come back to me. Another example is the Klingon Empire Sourcebook, of course. There's lots of material in the Klingon Empire Sourcebook, or the Klingon Empire Core Book, including ship statistics, especially for space frames. Space frames are just a matter of building a ship. You would pick a space frame to get the system stats, and then a little bit later in the book you would pick a mission profile, and that mission profile will generate your departments along with the bonuses that the space frame gives to you. There's also usually a list of talents that you can pick from. That's important in Captain's Log, so that you can have those talents to choose for your ship. So that's a couple different ways of playing, or to create ships. Oh yes, the third way, now that I've jogged my memory. If you don't want to be bothered to go look at other products, or you don't feel like you want to go buy another product, that's totally fine. We're not expecting you to buy anything for this game, really, but if you said to yourself, well, I want an easy way to create a non-Starfleet ship, what you can do is go into, and you just want to just use Captain's Log, maybe grab Captain's Log, and I didn't think to put Captain's Log up in here, but that's okay. What you could do is just flip through Captain's Log, look at all the different starship options that are in there, and maybe you think to yourself, well, I'm playing an original series campaign, and I'm playing a Romulan campaign, right? So I'm playing a Romulan captain and vessel in the original series. Maybe I want to play on a ship that's roughly comparable to I don't know. Constitution would be too easy to say. So maybe there's a Miranda class ship equivalent in the Romulan fleet, and you say, you know what, the Miranda class stats are pretty good. I think I'm going to just reskin that to be a Romulan warship or a Romulan scout ship or something. And so without changing the numbers and without changing the focuses necessarily in the book, you just created a Romulan ship. It happens to be stat-wise identical to a Federation ship right out of the book, but all you need for the purposes of the mechanics is the stat block. You would go pick whatever focuses you feel like picking for the ship, and then you're off and running, right? So just in a matter of minutes, you're flipping through the book, and you're thinking, okay, well, maybe I'm playing a next-gen era game, and I want to play a Miradorn captain on a Miradorn ship, and the Miradorn ship is a heavy freighter, well armed. Maybe it's equivalent to a Nebula class ship, right? Maybe it's a really powerful civilian mercenary / armed vessel of some sort. So you take the Nebula and you just take the stat block and you rename it to whatever you want to rename it to, and then you pick your focuses. You're off and running. You haven't had to go through any of our other products. You don't have to have created something out of whole cloth. You're simply taking the existing stat block that's in Captain's Log and just adapting it to your needs. Again, no one's going to notice the difference unless you point it out. Like as you're writing your narrative and you provide the story and whatever, you're going to be probably presenting your character sheet, which will say, Miradorn warship. You've got your stat block. Probably no one's going to stop and take your stat block and compare it to what's in Captain's Log, because who's going to go to that level of effort, right? So anyway, just wanted to give you some options and ideas here. We've been at this for about 20 minutes. Hopefully this has been useful. This is just really the intention was to show you how you can use the existing material in Captain's Log to create starships as needed for non-Starfleet, non-Federation games, and also how you can pull in other starships and alien species from our other product line, or using the free character builder, or just using your own imagination to create a trait block, a trait paragraph, and 3 attribute bonuses for your species, and you're off and running. And then for starships, again, you are either grabbing something out of the book and adapting it for use in another species, you're creating that stat block out of whole cloth, or you're pulling it in from one of our other products as is, or maybe making some tweaks to it. I mean, at this point, we've got 29 or 30 different print products. We've got well over 50 to 100 standalone adventures, mission briefs, etc. So there is a ton of Star Trek Adventures content out there available to you. Maybe you've already been buying into the STA game. If not, that's okay too. Again, I'm not here to sell you on more stuff, but it's there and available to you in print and PDF format. You can always go check it out. Borrow somebody else's PDFs or books and just copy down the stat blocks if that's something that you want to do. Again, hit the character builder. There's a lot of great stuff in there. Look online. Go to Continuing Mission, which is the #1 fan site for Star Trek Adventures. There's a wealth of material on there, either custom alien species write-ups, assorted starships, etc. Go to some of the fan sites like the Discord channel, the Facebook groups, the subreddit, etc. There's just a wealth of Star Trek Adventures material out there that you could mine whole cloth if you wanted to, and no one's going to be any wiser unless you point it out. So anyway, so I hope this has all been useful to you. Again, any questions, drop it down into the comments. Let me put my video back on here just to say goodbye to you. So thanks for your time. Again, any comments, questions, drop them into the comment section below. Like and subscribe if you feel so inclined. Thank you so much to everybody who has subscribed already. I am gratified and overwhelmed and humbled that so many people have subscribed to my channel. So thanks for doing that. Really appreciate you. Thanks for being here. Got lots more content coming up here in the coming days and weeks, so stay tuned. Thanks so much again, and have a great rest of your day.